Story 1. The woman he saw behind me. The Scottish Highlands in October have a way of swallowing sound. Wine drags through the gorse and heather like a slow whisper, and even the crows seem reluctant to disturb the silence. When even MacLeod parked his old Land Rover by the edge of the glen, dusk was already sliding down the mountains. The air smelled of peat, damp stone, and something faintly metallic, like rusted chains after rain. He stepped out, slinging his camera bag across his shoulder. The hollow where the witch danced, the locals had called it. An oval clearing ringed by crooked birches, said to be cursed since the 17th century. But that was precisely what drew him here. Evan was chasing a series he called Ghost Landscapes, places where stories linger longer than the people who told them. He planned to camp overnight, capture the mist, the firelight, the feeling of being alone in an old, haunted world. He hiked a quarter mile from the road until the grass flattened under his boots into that oval space, a natural amphitheater of silence. The birches leaned inward like eavesdroppers. At the center lay a circle of stones blackened by centuries of soot. It looked like an extinguished ritual. He set up camp there. The tent went up easily. The ground was soft. He gathered fallen branches and coaxed a fire into life. The flames licked orange against the mist, casting warped shadows across the stones. Even took a few Polaroids, watching the images fade in. The photos came out pale, almost empty, as if the place refused to be captured. By the time he finished his simple dinner, beans, bread, a flask of whiskey, the fog had thickened. It crawled low, hugging the earth, dimming the fire's reach. He was adjusting his tripod when he heard it. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, crunching across wet leaves. "Hello," he called, half expecting a hiker, a farmer, anyone human enough to explain away the sudden rush of cold down his spine. Nothing. Then, from the fog, a man stumbled forward. He was barefoot, clothes shredded, face streaked with mud. His beard was tangled, and his eyes darted like an animal's. "Christ, are you all right?" Evan said, stepping closer. The man's lips moved, dry and cracked. "I'm sorry," he whispered. Evan froze. For what? But the stranger, Ronan, as he would later call himself, only stared at the fire as if mesmerized, then turned and melted back into the fog. Evan stood there for a long minute, the sound of his own heartbeat loud in his ears. He called out, shone his flashlight around, but there was no trace of footprints, just trampled grass that seemed to rearrange itself when he blinked. He told himself it was exhaustion, isolation, the mind playing tricks. By midnight, he had convinced himself to sleep. The fire had dwindled to embers, hissing softly in the damp. The last thing he remembered before drifting off was the wine brushing the tent walls like fingertips. He woke to silence. No wind, no birds, just stillness thick enough to press against his eardrums. The air smelled warm, sweet, decaying. Even unzipped the tent. Dawn had turned the fog silver. His fire pit was cold, but the stones had been rearranged in a circle, perfectly symmetrical. In the center, a Polaroid lay face down. He picked it up. It was one of his photos from last night, but altered. Someone, or something, had scratched lines through the foggy landscape, carving a crude silhouette of a woman behind him. He stared at it, unsettled. It could be a trick of exposure, light interference. But he didn't remember anyone standing behind him. At noon, he decided to hike toward Loch Ness, maybe find a signal to upload a few photos. The mist was thinner there, the sunlight weak but steady. He met a shepherd along the way, an old man with a crooked spine and 2 dogs at his heels. "You're camping up the hollow?" the man asked after Evan mentioned his plans. His voice carried a tremor that wasn't age. "Yes, just for a few nights." The shepherd shook his head slowly. "Best not. The ground remembers. My father found a man there once, burned where he stood. Said he saw a woman dancing in the flames. No one goes near it after dusk." Evan smiled politely, thanked him, and kept walking. Local legends made for good atmosphere. But he didn't believe in ghosts. By evening, clouds rolled in heavy and grey. He returned to camp and reignited the fire. The air thickened again, carrying the faint crackle of static, like a faraway radio signal. He sat by the fire, sipping whiskey, watching shadows bend in the flames. His camera rested beside him, shutter clicking occasionally from the motion detector. Then he heard it again. Footsteps. Ronan, he called, before realizing he didn't know why he'd used that name. It had just appeared in his mind, as if whispered from somewhere behind him. The fog parted. It was Ronan. Same torn clothes, same hollow eyes, but this time streaked with blood. His mouth trembled, his hands shaking as he staggered toward the firelight. "She's behind you, even," Ronan rasped, eyes rolling white. "She's always behind you." Even stomach clenched. He turned, flashlight sweeping across empty mist. "Who?" "There's no one," Ronan screamed, pointing. Her face, it's inside the fire. The flames leapt, roaring as if fed by gasoline. Even stumbled back, shielding his face. For a split second, he saw it. A woman's face, burned and grinning, rising within the fire like a reflection on molten glass. Her eyes were empty sockets, her mouth stretched too wide, a parody of laughter. Then Ronan lunged into the fire. Even shouted, rushing forward. But the man vanished into the blaze without a sound. No smoke, no smell, no trace. Just the fire collapsing inward, leaving a hollow of blackened ash. He backed away, trembling, unable to breathe. His camera flashed once, an automatic exposure. The Polaroid slid out and landed at his feet. In it, the flames were gone, but someone stood behind him in the frame. Even did not sleep that night. He sat outside his tent until the horizon bled from black to grey, the fire long dead, the air sharp as glass in his lungs. Every sound, the settling of branches, the sigh of wind, twisted itself into the echo of Ronan's scream. At dawn, he forced himself to move. He needed proof, something, to convince himself he hadn't imagined everything. He picked up the Polaroid lying in the ash ring. It showed him, seated by the fire, staring into nothing. Behind him, a figure, blurred, featureless, standing half in the fog. A shape too tall, too wrong for Ronan. Its head bent forward, as if whispering into his ear. His fingers trembled. He slid the photo into his jacket pocket and began packing. The tent poles shook in his hands. The ground itself seemed to breathe. By noon, he was back at his Land Rover. The engine sputtered once, twice, then died. The dashboard flickered as though the battery had drained overnight. He hit the steering wheel, frustration rising in his throat like bile. When he glanced at the rearview mirror, he froze. In the mirror, behind his seat, sat Ronan. Even spun around, but the back seat was empty. The air carried a faint smell of smoke and scorched hair. He stepped out, slammed the door, and leaned against the car. His pulse thudded in his ears. The Highlands spread silent and endless around him, the horizon lost in mist. He took out his phone. No signal. Of course, he was miles from the nearest village. He decided to hike down to the loch, maybe reach a road. He left the car locked and followed the dirt track winding downhill through heather and stone. The fog grew denser. At times he could barely see 10 feet ahead. Then came a sound, crack, like someone stepping on dry twigs. He turned. Nothing. He walked faster. Another sound, whispering. Not words, but the cadence of speech, someone murmuring just at the edge of hearing. He stopped, held his breath, and listened. Behind you. He whirled around, flashlight sweeping across the fog. Still nothing. His chest tightened. He started running. The path curved sharply, leading to a small wooden bridge over a stream. He stumbled onto it, then stopped dead. Ronan was standing in the middle of the bridge, barefoot, soaked, his clothes clinging like second skin. His eyes were pale as milk. His mouth hung open, but no breath came out. Ronan even managed. You need help. Please. The man's jaw moved. His voice was wrong, too deep, like to people speaking in unison. She's behind you. Even step back. Stop it. There's no one there. She was with me first, Ronan said. Or maybe it was the thing inside him. I tried to burn her away. But fire only feeds her. Now she wants you. Who? The man's head tilted at an impossible angle. A wet crack echoing through the fog. The one who dances. Then he fell backward off the bridge, into the stream. The splash was small, almost gentle. Even ran to the edge and peered down. But the water was empty. No body. Just his reflection trembling in the current. He turned and ran. By late afternoon, he reached a cluster of stone cottages at the edge of a village called Drumnadrochit. The inn sign creaked in the wind. The thistle and crown. The woman behind the counter looked up as he entered, eyes narrowing at his disheveled state. You look like you've seen the Bean Nighe herself, she said half-jokingly, naming the Scottish death washer. Even didn't smile. I need a room. Just for tonight. She handed him a key, then hesitated. Where have you come from? The hollow, near the birch woods. Her expression shifted. Something between pity and alarm. You shouldn't have gone there. That place doesn't rest. Even ignored her and climbed to his room. He locked the door, drew the curtains, and sat on the bed with his camera. The Polaroids from the last 2 days were spread across the quilt. He flipped through them slowly. Most were ordinary. Mist, trees, campfire. But in nearly every frame, a smudge lingered at the edge of light. A suggestion of a woman's shape. Always behind him. He loaded the final photo, the one from after Ronan vanished, into his laptop for a closer look. Zoomed in, adjusted contrast. The face appeared clearer. Not a trick of smoke. Not pareidolia. Burnt skin. Hollow eyes. A grin carved too deep into melted flesh. Even pushed back from the desk, knocking over his chair. His heart pounded so hard he thought his ribs might crack. The air in the room shifted. The lights flickered. He smelled smoke. Then, a soft laugh. He turned toward the fireplace. Inside the cold hearth, the ashes began to stir, glowing faintly. A tongue of flame unfurled from nothing, curling upward like a living thing. The fire built itself from air, roaring without fuel. And in it, her face again. She looked straight at him, her mouth moving soundlessly. The laughter crawled up the walls, multiplied, echoing from every corner, even backed into the corner. What do you want? The flame woman smiled wider, revealing blackened teeth. Her voice came through the crackling. I want to dance again. The windows shattered outward. Wind and ash poured through the room. The fire spilled from the hearth like water, spreading across the floor but leaving no burn marks. The temperature plummeted. Then everything went dark. He woke sprawled on the floor. The fire was gone. The air was heavy with soot. His camera lay beside him, still recording. He checked the footage. The video showed him standing by the hearth, speaking to someone unseen. Then, nothing. Just static. But in the last 2 seconds, before the camera cut out, a faint figure appeared behind him. A woman, her hands resting on his shoulders. He shut the laptop. He needed to leave. Now, he grabbed his bag, his camera, the Polaroids. As he stepped into the hallway, the innkeeper appeared at the far end, holding a candle. Her face was pale. Don't go back there, she said. The hollow doesn't let people leave clean. He didn't answer. Outside, dawn was a thin grey line on the horizon. His car still wouldn't start, so he walked. Back toward the glen, though he didn't know why. Only that some part of him had to return. The fog met him halfway. The path curved through skeletal trees, the ground soft with moss and old ash. When he reached the clearing, the fire pit had reassembled itself. Stones in a perfect circle, and standing at its center was her. The woman's dress was made of smoke and flame, flickering with every breath of wind. Her hair hung in black, charred ropes. She tilted her head, eyes like hollow coals, and smiled. "You brought me your eyes," she whispered. "Let me show you what you never saw." She raised a hand. The world folded inward. Morning broke without color. The Highlands lay under a blanket of fog so thick it seemed to erase the horizon. Every sound came muffled, as if the world were holding its breath. Evan stood at the edge of the clearing, camera in one hand, the cursed Polaroid in the other. He didn't remember walking back here. His memories blurred between waking and dreaming, the innkeeper's voice, the hollow laughter in the fire, the woman's burning eyes. Now there was only this place, this ring of stones, this air that smelled like smoke and rot. He looked down. The grass beneath his boots was blackened, ash mixed with soil. And there, half buried in the soot, something white caught the light. Another Polaroid. He brushed away the dirt. The image showed himself lying in the clearing, exactly where he was standing now, but with the witch's hand resting on his shoulder. The timestamp at the bottom was dated tomorrow. He dropped it. His heartbeat roared in his ears. He should run, leave the tent, the gear, the car, walk until he reached the road, the lock, civilization. But his legs wouldn't move. Something in the forest was watching him. He lifted the camera and took a blind photo toward the trees. The shutter clicked. The film spat out slowly, whirring, developing in the cold. As the image darkened, he saw between the birch trunks the faint outline of a woman. Closer than before. He backed away, heart hammering, snapping photo after photo, each one emerging with her figure a few steps nearer. Until, on the last frame, she stood directly behind him. He turned. Nothing. Only mist. Then, footsteps. Crunching leaves, deliberate, pacing the circle. He spun, camera raised like a weapon. "Ronan!" he called. The fog parted. It was Ronan, or what was left of him. His skin had the waxy pallor of something long dead. His mouth was split open at the corners, and from the gash rose a faint ember glow. "She's waiting," he croaked. "She doesn't like when they run." Even stepped back. "You're not real." Ronan's head tilted. "Neither is she. But she remembers." The man's eyes turned white again, smoke curling from his nostrils. His body began to twist, bones snapping under invisible pressure. Then he fell forward, convulsing, his mouth opening wider and wider until it wasn't Ronan's voice that came out, but hers. A woman's whisper, charred and echoing. "You took her picture," the voice said through him. "Now she'll take yours." Even dropped the camera and ran. He didn't know how long he ran. Minutes, hours. The fog warped distance. Every turn looked the same. The birches blurred into white streaks. His lungs burned. He burst into a clearing he didn't recognize, an older part of the forest where massive oaks clawed the sky. One tree in particular loomed from the center, enormous and gnarled, its trunk scorched black halfway up. The bark shimmered faintly in the fog, wet with dew or blood, and hanging from its branches were dozens of Polaroids, fluttering like pale leaves. Even stumbled closer, breath catching in his throat. Each photo showed faces, dozens of them, men, women, children, all staring into the camera, wide-eyed, terrified. Some with flames licking their shoulders, others with the witch's shadow behind them. He reached out and plucked one down. It was Ronan, younger, alive, smiling awkwardly beside a campfire. But behind him, there she was, the same burned face, the same grin, even stomach lurched. He tore another photo from the branch, then another. Every one bore her image, and on the lowest branch, swinging gently in the wind, was a fresh Polaroid. His own face. He dropped it as a voice whispered right behind his ear. "You were always going to be mine, even." He turned, camera shaking in his hands. Through the fog, the witch emerged. Her form flickered, half fire, half flesh, her feet barely touching the ground. The burned side of her face glowed like embers, The other half impossibly human, young, almost beautiful. "Who are you?" he shouted. "What do you want from me?" She smiled, her teeth black with soot. "I want to be seen." Her fingers brushed his cheek, cold as river stone. "All who see me keep me alive." Even stumbled back. "Ronan tried to burn you." "He fed me," she hissed. "Fire is how I breathe." Flames erupted around her, curling through the grass, climbing the oak. The Polaroids ignited one by one, faces blistering in the heat. The air filled with the smell of burning film and skin. Even turned to run, but roots lashed from the ground, wrapping around his ankles. He fell hard, camera skidding from his grasp. "Please," he gasped, struggling. "Let me go." The witch leaned down, hair falling in scorched strands around his face. "You came to capture ghosts," she whispered. "Now be one." She pressed her palm to his chest. The pain was instant, searing. Fire crawled through him, spreading under his skin. He screamed as the world blurred to orange and red. His vision filled with her smiling face. Then everything went silent. When the search team found the clearing 3 days later, they assumed it was an old ritual site struck by lightning. The fire had burned hot enough to melt the stones together. There was no trace of Evan's body, only his melted camera, half buried in ash, and a single Polaroid hanging from the blackened oak. The photo showed Evan sitting by his campfire, eyes open, expression strangely calm. Behind him stood the silhouette of a woman, hand resting on his shoulder. Her face was turned toward the viewer, mouth curled in a scorched grin. Pinned beside it, someone had written in ash-black letters, "The hollow where the witch danced." Weeks later, back in Drumnadrochit, the innkeeper's grandson found an unmarked envelope in the mail slot. Inside were 4 Polaroids. 3 showed empty landscapes, mist, birches, the glen at dusk. The 4th showed the innkeeper herself, asleep in bed, and behind her, in the firelight from her hearth, a woman's burnt face smiled faintly, as if posing for the camera. Story 2: The man WHO knew my name. Tokyo never truly slept, but at 3 in the morning, it learned how to whisper. Below the endless neon skyline, a river of headlights flowed quietly along the expressway. Tehamo's city life reduced to a distant throb. Inside apartment 1503 of the Kurmachi Heights complex, Leela Harper sat cross-legged on her futon, laptop open, the glow of its screen bleaching her face ghost pale. Lines of code scrolled across the display, tiny worlds that obeyed her every command. Debugging was the only thing that kept her sane during nights like this. The air conditioner hummed softly. Outside, the sky was ink blue, the moon trapped behind the high-rise skyline. At 2:57 a.m., she heard it. A soft tap. Not from the window, from the wall. She froze, her fingers hovering above the keyboard. Another tap. Then 2 more. Steady, deliberate, like someone drumming a single finger on the other side of the drywall. Leela pulled off her headphones, listening. Her apartment was small, a single room, kitchenette, and sliding closet door beside the bed. No adjoining neighbors that night. The unit next door had been empty since the last tenant moved out a week ago. She told herself it was plumbing or the pipes contracting in the cold. But when the tapping stopped, something about the silence felt expectant. She got up, padded barefoot to the wall, and pressed her ear against it. Nothing. She exhaled, half laughing at herself. "You're fine, Leela. You're just tired." Then, thump. A deep, solid impact that shook the shelf above her desk. Her heart slammed against her ribs. She snatched her phone, switched to the camera app, and started recording as she approached the wall again. "Hello?" she said quietly, absurdly polite to whoever or whatever might be listening. "If someone's there, I'm calling the landlord." No answer. The silence stretched so long she could hear her own pulse in her ears. And then, faintly, something brushed the inside of the wall, like fingertips sliding down plaster. Leela backed away until her calves hit the futon. This was Tokyo. It wasn't supposed to be haunted. No drafty mansions, no graveyards under old houses, just steel and concrete. Logical. Safe. She shut her laptop, turned on every light, and left the TV playing static just to fill the air with noise. When the clock hit 4 a.m., she finally drifted into a shallow sleep. The morning sun turned the city gold, sharp and blinding. Leela sat bleary-eyed at her desk, staring into her mug of black coffee. The wall looked ordinary in daylight. White, unblemished. No marks, no cracks. Her landlord, a kind but wary man named Ito, came up to inspect after her panicked message. He tapped the plaster with his knuckles, frowned. Pipes? He said. Or maybe a rat got into the insulation. I heard knocking, she said. Not scratching. Ito shrugged. Buildings talk at night, especially old ones. When he left, Leela sat staring at the wall again. Buildings talk, he'd said. By afternoon, she'd convinced herself it had been a half dream. She worked through the day, made noodles for dinner, watched a rerun of a cooking show she didn't understand. The city outside pulsed with routine. Then midnight came. The power flickered once. And the tapping returned. This time, it came from inside the sliding closet. Leela's breath caught. She turned her head slowly toward the sound. The closet door, painted white with a brass handle, was trembling ever so slightly. Tap, tap, tap. She stood, heart hammering, phone camera shaking in her hand. Who's in there? She whispered. No answer. She edged closer. Each step made the wooden floor creak. The tap stopped. Then, something scraped, like a shoe turning on tile. Her voice broke. I'm calling security. She yanked the closet door open. At first, she saw only her coats, dresses, the dark gap behind the hanging clothes. Then, from within that gap, a hand slid into view. It was pale, trembling, nails cracked. Then the rest of him stepped forward. A man in a red delivery uniform, face gaunt and eyes wide, a name badge huffed on from his chest. Leela stumbled back, slamming into the dresser. Who are you? He didn't answer. His lips were sealed shut with black thread. Thick stitches, crude and uneven, crossing his mouth like a child's sewing project. He tried to speak, a muffled, choking noise bubbling behind the thread. Blood began to seep between the seams. Leela screamed. The man raised a shaking hand, pleading, not threatening, and pulled a small paper card from his pocket. The edge was soaked with red. It was a delivery receipt. Her name printed clearly at the top. Leela Harper, APT 1503. The date, yesterday. Leela's mind reeled. She hadn't ordered anything. She hadn't even opened the door for anyone. The man looked at her with desperate, terrified eyes. He tried to force a sound through his sewn mouth. The threads snapped one by one with wet pops until he could whisper through the blood. Leelachan, I've been watching since the elevator camera. Her scream caught in her throat. He reached into his pocket again and drew out a fruit knife, her fruit knife. The one missing from her kitchenette drawer. That broke her paralysis. She lunged for the balcony door, fumbling with the lock as he staggered forward, knife trembling in his bloody hand. The door flew open. Cold wine rushed in. She stepped out onto the narrow ledge, 15 floors above the street. Neon signs flickering below like a drowned carnival. Behind her, the man stumbled from the closet, footsteps slow and heavy. Stay away, she shouted. He lifted his head. His mouth hung open, black thread dangling loose. He smiled. See you soon, he whispered. Then the lights went out. The entire apartment plunged into darkness. The only glow came from the city below, throwing his silhouette across the floor. Leela climbed onto the railing, gripping the edge, ready to jump to the neighboring balcony. Her heart thundered. The wine tore at her hair. Help, she screamed into the night. Someone, please. A door opened on the balcony next door. A woman in a robe stepped out, startled. Desbu, she called. Are you okay? Leela didn't answer. She vaulted across the gap, scraping her hands on the concrete but landing safely on the neighbor's balcony. She turned back. The man was gone. The lights flickered back on. Her own balcony stood empty. The sliding door was open, curtains billowing. Only one thing remained inside apartment 1503. Written on the closet wall in long, dripping strokes of blood. See you on the 13th floor. Her building had only 12. The police came just before dawn. Two uniformed officers, polite but skeptical. They swept through apartment 1503 with flashlights and clipboards, photographed the blood-streaked closet wall, and left after 3 hours with no evidence of an intruder. No signs of forced entry, one officer said in practiced Japanese. No body, no knife, no man in a red uniform. Are you sure you weren't dreaming, Miss Harper? Leela just nodded mutely. She didn't trust her voice not to crack. After they left, she sat in the corner beside the balcony door, knees pulled to her chest. The blood had already dried into rust-colored trails across the white wall. Maintenance had promised to paint over it, but she couldn't bear the idea of anyone touching it yet. Not when the words still gleamed wetly in her mind. See you on the 13th floor. Her building only had 12. The next day at noon, Leela went downstairs to the lobby, half to clear her head, half because she couldn't stay inside any longer. The elevator hummed quietly, a familiar, neutral sound in a city that ran on machinery. But when she stepped inside, she hesitated. The panel read 1 to 12. Yet the space between 12 and L, the lobby, looked uneven. The metal panel was scratched, as though someone had tried to carve something there. She squinted closer and saw faintly etched numbers. 13. Her stomach dropped. Just vandalism, she whispered to herself. But her reflection in the mirrored walls didn't look convinced. There were faint bags under her eyes, the hollow look of someone who hadn't slept since the blood appeared. As the elevator descended, it stuttered midway between floors 8 and 7, lights flickering. A faint click echoed from above, like the sound of a camera shutter. Then the display blinked briefly. 13. The lights steadied. The elevator resumed. The number vanished. Leela pressed the emergency intercom, but static hissed through the speaker. The building's security office was a small glass booth beside the mailboxes. The guard on duty, Mr. Tanaka, looked up from his newspaper when she approached. Miss Harper, you're from 1503. Yes. He smiled wearily. I heard about last night. Police made quite a stir. Can I see the elevator footage? She blurted. Please. Tanaka frowned. That's not really allowed for tenants. I think someone's been following me, she said, lowering her voice. He said he'd been watching me from the elevator camera. That made him pause. After a moment, he sighed and waved her inside. Fine. But if the building manager asks, you didn't hear this from me. The monitor screens filled an entire wall, grainy black and white footage of every hallway, every lobby corner. The elevator feed flickered at the bottom row. Tanaka rewound the tape to 2 a.m. They watched in silence. Leela appeared on screen, leaving her apartment in panic, sprinting toward the balcony. A moment later, the lights went out. The camera cut to static. Then, for just a second, the feed cleared. The elevator doors on the ground floor slid open, though no one had called it. A man stepped out, thin, hunched, still wearing a red delivery uniform. His face was turned away, head tilted slightly, as if listening to something behind the lens. Stop there, Leela said. Can you zoom in? Tanaka magnified the frame until the pixels blurred. The man's name badge came into view, just barely legible. Kenji Morita. Leela's breath caught. That's him. The guard typed something into his console. There's no delivery record under that name. No company either. The next frame flickered again, Kenji walking into the elevator. The door closed. The floor counter began rising. 10, 11, 12. Then it kept going. 13. Leela stared at the monitor. There is no 13th floor. Tanaka frowned. That's impossible. It must be a software error. The video continued. The elevator doors opened onto a hallway neither of them recognized. Dark, windowless, walls the color of ash. Kenji stepped out and disappeared down the corridor. Then the footage cut to black. That night, Leela dreamed of the elevator. The metallic hum, the mirrored walls, the faint smell of antiseptic. She pressed 12, but the button stuck. The panel flickered, 13. The doors opened onto a corridor bathed in red light. A whisper echoed from down the hall. Leela-chan. She woke screaming, drenched in sweat. Her clock read 3:03 a.m., the same time the knocking had started 2 nights ago. Something was different this time. The air felt heavy, electric. The TV flickered on by itself, snowstorm static filling the room. Through it came a faint voice, distorted but unmistakably human. Floor 13. Leela covered her ears. Stop it. The static rose to a shriek, then cut off. The apartment fell silent except for her ragged breathing. She backed toward the door, hand trembling on the lock. I'm leaving, she whispered to no one. Right now. The moment she turned the handle, her phone vibrated in her pocket. A text from an unknown number. Oh, private sender, don't take the elevator. Her pulse froze. She stared at the message, hands slick with sweat. Then another came through. Oh, private sender, he's waiting between floors. The stairwell reeked of metal and mildew. Leela descended quickly, clutching her phone like a weapon. The emergency lights buzzed overhead, casting long shadows on the concrete walls. On the 9th floor landing, her phone vibrated again. A private sender, look behind you. She froze. The air went cold. She turned slowly. The elevator doors on the 9th floor stood open, though no one had called them. Inside, the lights flickered. A faint hum, like breathing, echoed from within. Then, through the flicker, a shape appeared. A man standing motionless in the corner, head bowed, mouth stitched. Kenji. The door began to close. His head lifted just enough for her to see his eyes, milky white, unblinking. And then the elevator dropped. A violent, bone-rattling crash shook the building, followed by the grind of metal against metal. Leela screamed and stumbled down the stairs, hands over her ears. The emergency alarms began to wail. An hour later, firefighters swarmed the lobby. They cordoned off the area, shouting in rapid Japanese. Leela sat wrapped in a blanket near the vending machines, shivering. An inspector approached her. Miss Harper, you were in the stairwell when the elevator fell. She nodded weakly. He exchanged a glance with another officer. It's strange. The shaft was empty when we checked. No one inside. But he hesitated. There was something else. He handed her a small evidence bag. Inside was a torn piece of red fabric, cinched at the edges, a uniform sleeve. Does this belong to your intruder? He asked. Leela could only stare. The name tag still clung to the fabric, blackened but legible. Kenji Morita. That night, back in her apartment, she packed a suitcase. Every light was on. She could feel eyes on her from every reflective surface. The mirror, the window, the darkened TV screen. She turned to the wall, whispering, I'm leaving tomorrow. You can't stop me. From somewhere deep inside the walls, something knocked once. Then again. Slower. Louder. The sound formed a rhythm. 4 knocks. Then pause. Then 4 again. Morse code. Her father had taught her Morse when she was a child. 13F, 13F. 13F. Leela's blood ran cold. She sunk to the floor, clutching her phone. The screen flickered to life by itself, showing a live feed from the building's security camera app, the same one she'd seen earlier in the guard's office. The view was inside the elevator. The doors opened. A man in a red delivery uniform stepped out, smiling through broken stitches. Leela-chan, he whispered through the phone speaker, come see your floor. Leela didn't sleep that night. She sat motionless on her couch until the sky began to pale behind the blinds, suitcase open but untouched beside her. The phone screen had gone dark hours ago, but the image of the red uniform still lingered in her mind. Kenji stepping out of the elevator that shouldn't exist. By 6 a.m., she'd made a decision. She couldn't leave without proof. She needed to see the 13th floor herself. The elevator was sealed off when she reached the lobby. Yellow police tape crossed the doors, and a handwritten sign in Japanese warned, "Under investigation, do not use." Mr. Tanaka wasn't at the security desk. The monitors were off, and the little glass booth stood empty. The silence was total. No humming machines, no footsteps, no city noise from outside. Just the slow, rhythmic ticking of the lobby clock. Leela tore the tape and stepped inside the elevator. The lights flickered on immediately, even though she hadn't pressed anything. The metallic scent was stronger today. Ozone and something else, like burnt hair. Her reflection in the mirror looked pale and ghost-like. The panel blinked awake. 1, 2, 3, 12, and then 13. The button wasn't scratched in this time. It glowed. Her thumb hovered over it. Every rational thought screamed, "Don't do it." But she pressed it anyway. The door sealed shut with a soft hiss. The hum deepened into a low vibration, as though the car was sinking through liquid instead of air. The floor numbers rose, 9, 10, 11, 12. And then the digital panel went black. The elevator stopped. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the doors opened. The hallway beyond was grey, narrow, and endless. The air smelled of mold and something metallic. Every few meters, a single fluorescent light buzzed overhead, flickering like a dying heartbeat. There were no apartment doors, no signs. Just walls that looked waterlogged and faintly pulsing. Leela stepped out, phone flashlight trembling in her hand. The elevator doors closed behind her, sealing her in. "Hello?" she whispered. "Kenji." Her voice didn't echo. It was swallowed instantly, as though the air itself refused to carry sound. She walked forward. At first, there was only the hum of the lights. Then, slowly, she began to hear it. Faint music. A soft, childlike tune. Something like a lullaby, distorted and distant. It was coming from behind one of the walls. She pressed her ear against the concrete. Behind it, a voice whispered her name. "Leelachan." She jerked it back, heart hammering. "You're not real," she said out loud, but her voice trembled. "You're dead." Another whisper. "Then why did you come?" At the end of the corridor stood a door. Old, wooden. The kind you'd find in an abandoned house, not a Tokyo apartment tower. Faded characters were carved into it. Kanji she couldn't read, but she recognized one symbol among them. The number 13. She tried the handle. It turned easily. Inside was a small, windowless apartment. A single flickering lamp illuminated the room. The furniture was sparse, table, chair, futon, but coated in a layer of fine dust. On the wall, hundreds of photographs were taped up in a collage. They were all of her, sleeping, working, brushing her hair near the window. Some taken through glass, others from strange angles, like ceiling corners, hallway cameras, elevator mirrors. Her stomach twisted. No. The floor creaked behind her. She turned. Kenji Morita stood in the doorway, still wearing the red delivery uniform. The stitches had come undone. Black thread dangled from the corners of his mouth like veins. His eyes were hollow sockets leaking dark fluid. "You open the door," he said softly. His voice was wet, distorted. "Now she can see you too." Leela backed away, tripping over a stack of boxes. Who's she? Kenji smiled, and for a second, his face shifted. The shadows warped across his skin, female features emerging from beneath, as though another face pressed outward from inside his flesh. The voice that came next wasn't his. It was higher, rasping, echoing. "I am the floor beneath your feet." The walls began to move. They pulsed, the wallpaper rippling like skin. Hands, grey, boneless, pushed out from beneath it, clawing toward her. Leela screamed and bolted for the door. But the hallway outside had changed. It now twisted impossibly, bending back upon itself. Every few steps, she found herself at the same spot she'd started, the same buzzing light overhead. Behind her, Kenji's footsteps echoed. Slow, deliberate. Step, step, step. She ducked into another corridor and found a stairwell. She ran down. One flight, two. But every landing led her back to floor 13. The numbers on the walls melted and reformed, identical each time. Her phone vibrated in her hand. An incoming call. Private number. She answered instinctively. Help me. A woman's voice replied, calm and close. Miss Harper, this is building management. We received your complaint about strange noises. Can you confirm your location? 13th floor, she cried. The elevator took me here. The woman interrupted. There is no 13th floor, ma'am. The call cut to static. Then, beneath the hiss, she heard breathing, and a whisper, faint but unmistakable. Behind you. Leela turned and screamed. Kenji stood inches away, his face split open, revealing another face inside his mouth. A pale woman's visage, eyes black as ink, grinning wide. The woman spoke through him. You watched the wrong way, little one. Cameras look both ways. The lights exploded. The hallway plunged into darkness. When Leela woke, she was lying in her apartment. Morning sunlight filtered through the blinds. The walls were clean. No blood, no photographs, no broken glass. Her phone sat on the table beside her, screen cracked but silent. Had it been a dream? Her first instinct was to leave. She packed her bag in under a minute, shoved her laptop and passport inside, and yanked open the front door. Mr. Tanaka was standing there, smiling politely. Good morning, Miss Harper, he said. Are you feeling better? She froze. You weren't here last night. He tilted his head. Last night. Then his voice dropped lower, softer, as though someone else was speaking through him. You've been gone 3 days. Leela stumbled backward. What? Tanaka smiled wider. We kept your room ready. 13th floor gets so lonely. Before she could answer, the hallway lights flickered. The numbers on the wall beside her door began to change, glowing faintly red. 1503 1303. Her suitcase fell from her hands. She turned and ran for the elevator, jabbing the L button repeatedly. The doors closed. The floor display lit up. 13. No, she whispered. No, please. The elevator descended instead of rising. Theham deepened into a groan, like something ancient waking beneath the building. When it stopped, the doors opened onto the same grey corridor. Waiting at the end was a figure in a red uniform, holding a camera. Kenji raised it, the flash igniting for a second. Click. Leela's scream echoed down the hall, and then silence. 1 week later, a new tenant moved into apartment 1503. A polite young woman named Ayaka. During her first night, she noticed something odd about the mirror near the door. It seemed newer than the rest of the apartment. And when she leaned closer, for just a heartbeat, she could swear she saw another woman standing behind her. Pale skin, hollow eyes, mouth stitched shut. Then the reflection smiled. Story 3. The empty car on Bloodwood Road. The desert was still humming with heat when Saf Dol left the gas station bar. The sign above the roof read, Oasis Fuel and Grill. But out here it might as well have said, nowhere. Beyond its flickering neon light stretched only red earth, scattered scrub, and a sky as wide as eternity. Her friend's laughter still echoed faintly behind her, drunken and carefree. They had urged her to crash in one of the rusty caravans behind the station, but Saf wanted the quiet walk back to camp. The dig site lay only 2 kilometers away, far enough to clear her head, close enough to feel safe. She tightened the strap of her pack and set off along the dirt road. The moon was high, bleeding pale light across the plains. The air smelled of dust and iron, and far in the distance, the wind whispered through the bloodwood trees, tall, red-barked sentinels that looked black against the stars. By the time she reached the halfway marker, the sound of music and laughter had faded entirely. There was only the crunch of her boots and the rhythmic pulse of her own breath. She was thinking about tomorrow's excavation, a layer of stone tools that could date back 40,000 years, when she heard the first engine. It started faint, a low rumble somewhere down the road behind her. Headlights bloomed suddenly in the darkness, searing bright, growing fast. Saf turned, shielding her eyes. A white ute, one of those old Holden models, dented and sun-bleached, slowed as it approached. The driver leaned out, face shadowed beneath a hat. Need a lift? Love. The accent was local. Friendly, almost too friendly. She forced a smile. Nah, I'm right. Just up the road. The man nodded once, his face disappearing back into darkness. The ute rolled forward, tires crunching over gravel until it vanished beyond the next rise. Saf exhaled and laughed quietly at her own nerves. Outback hospitality, she muttered, resuming her pace. But when she looked again a minute later, the white ute had stopped ahead. Its taillights glowed like twin eyes in the night. She froze. The ute didn't move. Then its reverse lights blinked on. No, 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 she whispered. The engine revved, and the headlights flared to life, blinding white. It began rolling backward toward her, slow at first, then faster. Saf stepped off the road, stumbling into the sand and scrub. Hey, she shouted. What the hell are you doing? The ute halted suddenly, engine idling. The driver's door hung open, swinging slightly in the wind. There was no one inside. Saf's throat went dry. Okay, she whispered. Nope. She turned and started walking back toward the highway lights, then jogging, then running. Behind her, the engine roared again. Tires screamed. The ute surged forward, kicking up dust and stones as it barreled after her. Saf darted into the bloodwood grove, branches whipping at her face. The ute crashed to a halt at the tree line, its headlights sweeping through the trunks like hunting beams. She ducked behind one of the redbark trees, breath shaking. The air smelled of sap, sweet and metallic, like blood. The engine idled, then cut off. Silence. She waited. 1 minute. 2. Her heart pounded so loud it drowned the crickets. When she dared peek from behind the trunk, the ute's headlights had gone out. Its white body gleamed faintly under moonlight, doors still open. It looked empty. Saf crept closer, holding her breath. The sand crunched softly under her boots. When she reached the driver's side, she saw the key still in the ignition. The dashboard clock flickered weakly. 1:47 a.m. Hello? She called, voice barely above a whisper. No answer. A chill ran through her, though the night was still hot. The air around the ute felt wrong, thicker somehow, like standing inside a storm that hadn't broken yet. The metal of the door handle was ice cold. She glanced into the cab. 2 coffee cups, a torn map, a pair of dusty boots on the floor, and the rearview mirror tilted sharply toward the passenger seat. A flash of movement. Saf gasped, spinning around, but there was nothing behind her. When she looked back through the mirror again, she saw herself reflected pale and ghost-like. And just behind her reflection, a face. Burned, blackened, half-melted. Smiling, Saf staggered back, tripped over a root, and fell hard onto the sand. The door slammed shut by itself. The ute's headlights flared on again, blinding her. Through the glare, she could see a figure in the driver's seat now, broad-shouldered, head tilted slightly as if listening. The window rolled down with a slow squeal. A voice rasped out, dry, distorted, almost human. You smell like smoke, little dingo. Saf scrambled to her feet and ran. Branches tore at her arms as she plunged deeper into the grove. Behind her, the ute's engine roared to life, tires grinding against the sand. The beam swept through the trees, cutting wide arcs of white light. Please, please, she gasped, stumbling. Her flashlight clattered to the ground and died. The engine revved again. The headlights flickered closer. She ducked behind another tree and pressed a hand over her mouth to silence her breathing. Through the hedge of dust, she saw the driver step out. The man was tall, wearing a torn leather jacket. His face was a ruin. One side burned black, the other pale as bone. When he turned toward her, the firelight from the Ute's engine reflected in his eyes, making them shine like coals. He raised his head, sniffing the air. I smell your fear. Saf bit down on a sob. Then something soft brushed against her boot. She looked down and froze. A hand, grey and shriveled, jutted from the sand. Not buried deep, just under the surface. She clawed backward, scraping at the dirt. The rest of the body emerged slowly, twisted and dry, like a scarecrow left in the sun. Recognition hit like a knife. It was Lara, one of her classmates. The one who had gone missing last week after wandering off from camp. Saf choked back a cry. Her trembling fingers brushed something cold on Lara's wrist. A silver bracelet Saf had given her. The burned man's voice echoed from the dark. Found your friend, did ya? Saf staggered up and ran again, heart hammering. The trees thinned. Ahead she could see the faint glint of her tent lights. The sound of the Ute followed, engine snarling, headlights flashing through the trunks. She burst from the grove, sprinting toward camp. The ground rose sharply. She scrambled up the slope, lungs burning. Behind her, the Ute's lights vanished. Silence again. Then, wham! The Ute slammed into a tree below her, flames bursting from its hood. Smoke curled upward, thick and black. Saf reached the ridge and collapsed, gasping. The fire spread quickly. The whole grove began to glow red in the night, like veins under burning skin. The air shimmered with heat. Saf forced herself up and stumbled toward the camp's signal barrel. There was an old jerrycan of petrol beside it. With shaking hands, she poured it over the fire pit and struck a match. The flare rose skyward, a tower of orange against the stars. Then she fell to her knees and watched the desert burn. When the police arrived the next morning, they found her sitting at the edge of the grove, face streaked with soot. She told them about the Ute, the burned man, the body of Lara. They listened, expressionless. Hours later, they called her over to the wreck. The Ute was still smoking. Inside, nothing remained but ash. In the glove compartment, they found a small collection of items, rings, earrings, fragments of fabric, and 11 shoes, each from a different woman. One of them was hers, a brown hiking boot missing from her tent 2 nights ago. They called him the Hunter of Bloodwood Road. At least, that's what the old man at the police outpost said when Saf mentioned the white Ute. He was weathered like dried bark, eyes squinting under the fluorescent light. His name tag reads Sergeant Collins. Used to be stories, he said, pouring coffee into a tin mug. Back in the 60s, maybe the 70s. Young women go missing along the stretch from the roadhouse to the dig sites. They'd find the cars empty, engines running, sometimes still warm. Always the same road, always the same smell of smoke. Saf stared at the steam rising from her own untouched cup. And you think it's the same man? Collins shrugged. Hard to think it's a man at all, sweetheart. That Ute you saw burned like it would been soaked in fuel for days. No bones, no metal melt pattern, nothing. But the registration number's been dead since 1984. Saf swallowed hard. Then who? Who was driving it? He looked at her for a long moment. That's what we'd all like to know. The next day, Saf went back. 2 investigators accompanied her. Detective Aaron Fry, tall, quiet, city-trained, and Sergeant Janine Holt, who wore sunglasses even in the shade. Their truck rolled over the red dirt road in a hedge of heat. The grove came into view, blackened from the night's fire. The bloodwood trees stood scorched, dripping resin that looked like blood. Fry stopped the car. This where you found the vehicle. Saf nodded, pointing. Right there. By that big tree with the split trunk. They got out. The air smelled of ash and something else. Sweet, cloying, chemical. Holt crouched near the wreckage tape. Nothing left but shadows, she muttered. Saf's throat tightened. Did you find Lara's body? Fry exchanged a glance with Holt. We didn't find anyone. Saf blinked. But she was right there. I saw her. I touched her. Then where is she now? Holt asked gently. Saf turned to the patch of earth she dug open the night before. The sand was smooth now, undisturbed, as if no one had ever been buried there. Her voice trembled. This isn't possible. Fry pulled a notepad from his pocket. You said the man's face was burned. Describe him. She closed her eyes. Half his face black and blistered, the other pale. Jacket, old leather, cracked. He called me Little Dingo. Said he could smell my fear. Holt frowned. That phrase, where would you hear it before? Saf shook her head. Nowhere. Not on the news? Old stories. No, I swear. Fry scribbled something down. We'll check local records. They stayed until the sun reached its cruelest height. The heat turned the air liquid, distorting the horizon. When Fry finally called it, they packed their equipment and headed back toward the truck. But Saf stopped. There were tracks in the sand. Fresh tire marks. Parallel, leading from the grove deeper into the scrub, where no road should exist. Did you drive that way? She asked. Fry followed her gaze. No. Then who did? The track stretched straight toward the shimmering horizon. The sand shimmered faintly, like it was breathing. A gust of wind carried the scent of burning rubber. Holt adjusted her sunglasses. Let's not chase ghosts. But Saf stepped forward, drawn like a moth. It's not ghosts, she said softly. It's him. They followed the tracks for nearly a kilometer before the truck stalled. The tires spun helplessly in soft sand. Fry swore under his breath and got out to assess the terrain. That's when they saw it. Another ute, identical to the one from last night. Same dense, same chipped white paint, sitting in the middle of the desert. Doors open. Engine off. Christ, Holt whispered. This wasn't on satellite this morning. Saf's heart thudded painfully. You see it too, right? It's not just me. They approached cautiously, weapons drawn. The air grew colder with every step. No wind. No insects. Not even the sound of their own footsteps after a while. When they reached the ute, Fry checked the plate number. Same one, he said grimly. A2-67-93. Saf felt dizzy. That's impossible. You said it was deregistered. Yeah, Holt said. 40 years ago. Inside the cab, a folded map lay across the passenger seat. Saf leaned closer. The paper was yellowed and brittle, edges burned. Circles were drawn in red ink across the region. Roads, highways, remote towns. And near the bottom, written in smeared letters. Where she died. Saf's voice barely came out. Who's she? The sky darkened suddenly, as if a cloud had passed, but there were no clouds. The light itself seemed to dim. Saf looked up, and her breath caught. On the ridge behind them stood a figure. He wore the same leather jacket, the same burned face. The right side of his head was raw and blackened. The left gleamed pale and slick like porcelain. He held something in his hand, a camera, old and cracked, dangling by a strap. Don't move, Fry hissed. The man began walking down the slope, slow and deliberate. Every step left a dark scorch mark in the sand. Sir, police. Holt shouted. Put your hands where I can see them. He didn't respond. His voice drifted down the wind, quiet, guttural. You smell like smoke. Fry raised his weapon. Sir, stop or I. The man vanished. Not ducked, not ran, gone. The space he'd occupied rippled like heat had, then stilled. The only thing left behind was the smell of burning flesh. Holt cursed. Did you see? I saw. Fry said. Get back in the truck. Now. But when they turned, the truck wasn't there anymore. The tracks they'd left behind had disappeared, replaced by a smooth expanse of untouched sand. The desert had changed. Night fell fast in the outback. They huddled near the old ute, using the dashboard light for illumination. Hall tried the radio, static. Fry tried the sat phone, dead. The horizon was empty in every direction. Saf stared at the map again. Her fingers traced one of the red circles near their current position. This mark here, she said. That's where the first disappearances were, right? Fry looked over her shoulder. According to local records, yeah. 1973, 4 women. No remains found. And here, she pointed, the circle near the Bloodwood Grove. Holt frowned. That's this place. Saf nodded slowly. He's marking where he found them. A faint sound drifted through the darkness then. A low rumble. Tires on dirt. Holt stiffened. No way. Headlights appeared on the ridge, sweeping the desert in wide beams. The same ute, or another just like it, rolled slowly toward them. Stay quiet, Fry hissed. The engine cut. The lights stayed on. Then, from the cab, a voice rasped. Little dingo. Saf froze. Holt cocked her pistol. That's enough. The door opened. A shape stepped out, broad shoulders, head tilted. The burned man again, smiling. Only now, his skin wasn't charred. It was wet, gleaming under the lights as if newly melted. He raised the camera and took a photo. The flash exploded white. When Saf blinked the spots away, he was gone again. But something glowed in the sand where he'd stood. A footprint, smoldering. By dawn, they found the truck again. Or maybe the desert gave it back. The engine started on the first try. They drove in silence until the horizon broke into the faded blue of morning. Back at the station, Sergeant Collins met them at the gate. You look like you've seen the devil. Maybe we did, Holt muttered. Collins nodded toward the back seat. And your passenger? Saf turned, confused. What? The old man frowned. The man with you. Burned face. He came in with you, didn't he? Her skin went cold. She looked to the seat behind her. A faint smell of smoke lingered in the air. And on the vinyl seat, burned into the fabric, was a handprint. For 3 days after the encounter, Saf couldn't sleep. Every night she closed her eyes, the same image burned behind her lids. The half-melted face, the camera flash, the smoldering handprint. She'd wake choking on the smell of diesel and ash. When she tried to tell the investigators, they said she needed rest. But on the 4th morning, Sergeant Holt called. Fry's gone missing. Saf's hand tightened around the phone. What do you mean, missing? He went back to the site. Said he wanted one last look before closing the case. Never came back. Saf felt her pulse thudding in her throat. Where exactly did he go? Same stretch, Holt said quietly. Bloodwood Road. Saf drove out before noon, dust trailing her old Subaru like smoke. The landscape stretched endless. Flat red earth, dead brush, the line of the highway melting into the horizon. When she reached the turnoff, the sky had turned the color of rust. She parked near the burnt grove. The ashes were cold now, the smell faded. But the silence was worse than before. No wind, no flies, nothing living. On the ground, she spotted fresh footprints. Boot prints. Deep, leading away from the grove, toward a section of desert that shimmered strangely, as if there was still heat rising from beneath. She followed them. At first the sand was soft and red. Then, gradually, it changed, flattened, hardened, until it resembled asphalt. She stopped, staring down. A road stretched before her, cutting through the wilderness where no road had ever existed. Its surface pulsed faintly, like the slow breath of a sleeping animal. Saf whispered, "What the hell?" Somewhere ahead, an engine turned over. The white ute appeared again, headlights distant and dim, crawling along the black surface of the impossible road. Saf dug behind a tree stump. Her heart pounded so hard she thought it might give her away. The ute rolled closer, tires whispering against the tar. It stopped a few meters ahead, and the driver's door creaked open. Smoke spilled out. Fry stumbled out of the cab. His uniform was torn, his skin pale, eyes wide and glassy. "Saf," he rasped. "Don't come closer." She took a step forward anyway. "Fry, what happened?" He shook his head violently. "He's inside it. The road, he is the road." "What are you talking about?" "The fire didn't kill him," Fry gasped. "It burned him into the land. The bitumen, the resin from the bloodwood trees, they used it to pave this stretch in the 70s. That's why it bleeds. It's him. He's been driving it ever since." Saf stared at him, trembling. "Who is he?" Fry's mouth twisted. "Truck driver. Real name was Eamon Ward. Used to run freight between here and the mines. Killed 11 women before his rig crashed. The fuel tank ruptured. He burned for hours. Still alive when they found him. He said he'd never stop hunting them." The wine picked up then, hot and acrid. The road began to shimmer violently. Saf heard it. A deep rumbling from beneath the surface, like an engine revving underground. Fry clutched his head. He's waking. The ground split. A black fissure tore open under his feet. Smoke and flame shot upward. Fry screamed as the asphalt swallowed him whole, pulling him down in a torrent of fire and grit. "Fry!" Saf screamed, reaching out. But the crack sealed itself shut, smooth again, leaving only the smell of burning hair. Then the headlights flared. The ute had no driver, but the wheel turned on its own. It idled forward, inching toward her. Saf ran. She didn't look back until she reached the ridge. The ute was still following, slow but relentless, engine snarling like a living thing. The road stretched behind it, growing longer with each roll of its tires, as if the land itself was laying down pavement beneath its wheels. The road wasn't just there. It was spreading. Saf scrambled up the rocks, lungs burning. She could see her car far in the distance, a tiny silver dot near the grove. But between her and salvation, the new road writhed like a snake, shifting, twisting, eating up the desert. Her foot slipped. She tumbled halfway down the slope, hitting hard. Sand filled her mouth. When she spat it out, it tasted like ash and tar. The ute rode below her. Its lights flared white, blinding. Then the voice came again, deep, rough, metallic. "Little dingo, run all you want. The road always finds home." Saf forced herself to her feet. "You're not real," she shouted. A laugh answered her. Dry, crackling, like fire eating through timber. Then stop running. She sprinted until her vision blurred. The terrain changed again. Scrub, stone, patches of old asphalt buried beneath sand. Ahead, the horizon shimmered silver. A metal glint. Her Subaru. She lunged for the door, yanked it open, started the engine. The car coughed once, twice, then roared to life. In the rearview mirror, she saw the ute cresting the ridge, its front bumper glowing red, smoke rising from the wheels. Saf slammed the accelerator. The tires bit into dirt. The Subaru shot forward, bouncing over the uneven ground. The engine screamed. She didn't dare blink. The road behind her was moving. The black line stretched, reaching, twisting to follow her like a living tendril. The ute stayed centered on it, gaining speed. She swerved left, cutting through a dry creek bed. The road couldn't follow across bare stone. But the ute didn't slow. It lifted from the surface, tires spinning in midair, then landed again with a thunderclap of dust and flame. Saf screamed, pushing the car harder. "Come on, come on." She reached the old roadhouse at last, a sagging relic of wood and rusted tin. She skidded to a stop in the parking lot, threw open the door, and ran inside. The interior was empty except for a mirror hanging crooked on the far wall. Dust motes floated in the dim light. Then she saw it. Her reflection. Except, behind her reflection stood the burned man. He was smiling. She spun around. No one. When she looked back, the mirror image was closer now. The man's hand rested on her shoulder in the glass. A whisper crawled out of the reflection's mouth. You left something on the road. Saf backed away. What? What do you mean? The reflection grinned wider. The mirror began to ripple like water. She saw flashes, photographs, flickering across the surface. Images of herself sleeping in the tent, running through the trees, crying in the desert, all taken from behind her shoulder. The final image, her standing exactly where she was now, in front of this mirror. The mirror shattered. Glass exploded outward, cutting her face and arms. Through the shards, she saw flame. The reflection's world burned, cars melting, trees blackening, sky aflame. The burned man stepped out through the glass, his boots cracking on the floor. Saf stumbled back. Stay away from me. He tilted his head. Half his face crumbled like charcoal, revealing the glow beneath. You saw the road, he said. Now it remembers you. Then he raised the camera. The flash was blinding. When she woke, she was lying on the highway shoulder, dawn breaking. Her Subaru was parked neatly nearby, engine still warm. For a moment she thought it had all been a nightmare, until she noticed the smell, tar and smoke, heavy in her lungs. In the sand beside her was a photo, a Polaroid. It showed her sleeping on the ground, exactly as she was now. Across the bottom, in smeared handwriting, drive carefully, little dingo. A week later, Saf left the Outback. She moved back to Sydney, sold her gear, and tried to forget. But at night, when the wind blew through the city streets, she could still hear the low hum of an engine idling somewhere far below. One night, she looked out her apartment window. Below, on the empty street, a white ute sat under the streetlight. Engine running, headlights off. The radio on her counter crackled to life. A man's voice whispered through static. The road moves, Saffron, and it's coming for you.